What happens when the most feared talk show host in America tries to corner one of comedy's most unshakable legends? From the very first question, the view turned into a battlefield. Joy Behar turns the interview into a public interrogation. She thought she could embarrass Eddie Murphy on live television. She thought she could rewrite his legacy with one question. But what came next wasn't just a clapback. It was a verbal demolition. In less than a minute, the stage that once belonged to Joy Behar belonged to him, and no one in that room would ever forget that moment. Trust me, this interview won't disappoint you. It'll be worth every second of your time. Eddie Murphy stepped onto the View set with that signature calm, the kind that comes from 4 decades of surviving Hollywood's chaos and still walking tall. He'd done this dance countless times. Crack a few jokes, plug the new film, flash that grin that could melt stone. But across the table, Joy Behar wasn't smiling the way normal people smile. Her grin looked painted on, tight, polite, and dangerous. She wasn't planning an interview. She was planning an ambush. When the cameras rolled, the audience cheered. Whoopi welcomed him with open arms. "Eddie Murphy, ladies and gentlemen," Whoopi said, her voice warm. "The legend himself." "Legend," Joy muttered, just loud enough for her mic to pick up. "Or just lucky." Eddie glanced at her, half amused, half warning. "Well," he said with a grin, "luck's just hard work that finally got noticed." The crowd laughed. Joy didn't. She leaned forward, eyes glinting. "You've been out of the spotlight for a while, Eddie. Hollywood forgets fast, doesn't it? What's it like trying to be funny in a world that's moved past you?" The audience went quiet. Eddie raised an eyebrow, that subtle smirk forming, the kind that said, "I've handled worse than this." "Moved past me?" he repeated slowly. "Joy, last I checked, people still laugh. I'm still funny. So unless laughter got canceled, I think I'm doing okay." Whoopi jumped in, trying to cool the tension. "So, Eddie, tell us about the new film." But Joy cut her off again. "I'm just curious," she said, pretending innocence, "how a man who built his career on jokes that wouldn't fly today handles. You know, growing up." Eddie's smile tightened. "Growing up's easy," he said evenly. "It's growing bitter that's the real challenge." A few chuckles rippled through the audience. Joy laughed, but it was thin, defensive. "You're quick with the comebacks, I'll give you that," she said. "But come on, Eddie. Don't you think the world's done with the old school humor? The leather suits, the cocky swagger, that version of you?" Eddie leaned back, studying her. "Funny," he said, "because every time I try to retire that version, someone like you drags him back out just to take a swing." Whoopi glanced at the producers off camera. She could feel the energy had shifted. This wasn't the usual morning banter anymore. Joy's tone had sharpened into something personal. "So you're saying criticism doesn't bother you?" Joy pressed. "Even when people say your jokes aged badly? Or that maybe you were part of the problem?" Eddie's smile faded. His voice stayed calm, but the edge was unmistakable. "Joy, I've been part of the solution for 40 years, giving people a reason to laugh when everything else told them not to. You don't survive this long by worrying about what upsets people who stopped laughing a long time ago." Joy smirked. "Sounds like denial with good lighting." "And yours sounds like envy with a microphone," Eddie shot back, still cool, still unshaken. A quiet gasp moved through the audience. Joy's smile cracked for the first time. Eddie looked straight at her. No grin now, just a steady, piercing calm. "Comedy's about connection," he said simply, "about seeing the world, even the ugly parts, and finding the light in it." Joy crossed her arms. "Or offending people depending on the paycheck." Eddie's eyes narrowed slightly. "No," he said. "Offending people is your job, Joy. I just make them laugh." The audience erupted, some laughing, some stunned. Whoopi blinked, unsure whether to intervene or let it play. Eddie leaned back in his chair, relaxed again. Then just as Whoopi was about to pivot to a question about Eddie's co-stars, Joy leaned forward. Her smile was gone. Her tone dropped a few degrees colder. "Let's talk about your old routines," she said sharply, cutting across Whoopi's sentence. "The ones people call hateful now. Do you regret them?" The air snapped tight. Eddie's grin froze halfway. His eyes shifted, not angry yet, but sharp. He gave a small, measured smile. Regret, he repeated slowly. I regret that people stopped laughing before they started thinking. Joy chuckled. That sarcastic kind of laugh that said she thought she'd already won. That's a convenient excuse for punching down. Eddie leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees. And that, he said calmly, is a lazy label for not understanding art. A hush fell. The tension thickened like smoke. Joy's eyes glinted. She smelled blood. So, you're proud, she pressed, voice dripping with mock sweetness. Proud of making jokes at other people's expense? Eddie didn't blink. No, he said quietly. I'm proud I made people laugh through their pain. Not at it. There's a difference, Joy. But I guess that takes empathy to understand. Joy's smirk faltered for half a second, then hardened. You think your success gives you immunity from accountability? She said louder now, her voice pitching into that familiar tone of moral outrage. Because you were funny, you get a free pass? Eddie didn't flinch. He spoke evenly, but his tone had steel in it. No, I earned my pass by surviving 40 years of people like you. The words landed heavy, not shouted, not theatrical, just honest, cutting. Joy blinked, taken aback. People like me? Eddie nodded. Yeah, the ones who build their careers tearing down others and then call it journalism. The ones who mistake cruelty for courage, the audience murmured. Joy's cheeks flushed. She tried to laugh it off, but it came out tight. I'm just asking the questions people want answered. Eddie tilted his head. No, he said. You're asking the questions that make you feel powerful. There's a difference. Joy leaned forward, certain she finally had him where she wanted him. Her smirk was sharp, her voice dripping with that familiar mix of confidence and condescension. So, Eddie, she said slowly, if you could go back, would you tell those same jokes today? The ones everyone's talking about? Eddie didn't blink. He didn't even flinch. He just leaned back, eyes fixed on her, voice flat and deadly calm. Only if I were sitting where you are. The room went dead silent. Whoopi froze mid-breath. Sarah covered her mouth, and for the first time Joy's smirk broke. Her hand twitched, her expression tightening like she'd just been slapped with truth instead of words. Eddie didn't let her recover. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, voice low but steady. You call me outdated, he said, but half of your punchlines are just cruelty in costume. You bully under the banner of virtue. Joy let out a short, defensive laugh. That's ridiculous. I don't bully. Eddie cut her off, his tone sharper now. Is it? Watch your reruns. Watch the way you talk to guests who don't agree with you. Watch how you smile while you do it. You don't interview people, Joy. You corner them. That hit like a blade. The air around the table thickened. You could see Whoopi shift uncomfortably, her eyes darting between them. Eddie paused, not to cool down, but to let the silence do its work. Then in that calm, surgical tone that cuts deeper than shouting ever could, he added, You mistake outrage for courage. It's not the same thing. The line landed with the weight of something final. It wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. It was truth, the kind that doesn't need volume to echo. Joy sat frozen. Her smile was gone, her eyes fixed on him, but without a single word left to throw back. Eddie leaned back again, the faintest smirk returning to his face. See, the funny thing about moral superiority, he said quietly, is it always cracks under laughter. You should try it sometime. Joy tried to force a laugh, but it came out brittle, the kind of laugh people use when they've already lost the room. She straightened her notes, trying to regain her balance. You sound defensive, Eddie, she said, her tone trying to sound casual but landing somewhere between irritated and desperate. Are we touching a nerve? Eddie didn't move. His expression was cool, steady, controlled. No, he said, voice even. You're touching history without understanding it. Joy blinked, caught off guard by the simplicity of it. Eddie leaned forward, his tone tightening just a bit. Not aggressive, just deliberate. You know what's funny? He said. People love comedy until it mirrors them. Then suddenly, it's offensive. Joy crossed her arms, that smirk trying to make a comeback. Or maybe people grew up, she countered, lifting her chin. Eddie smiled faintly, but it wasn't friendly. No, Joy, he said. They just got scared of honesty. The crowd didn't laugh. They murmured. It wasn't entertainment anymore. It was something heavier. People were nodding, shifting, looking from one to the other, like watching two heavyweight fighters circle the ring after a hard hit. Joy felt it, the air slipping away from her control. She fidgeted, flipping through her cue cards, stalling. You really think nothing's changed? She asked. Eddie shrugged. Everything's changed, he said, but the truth hasn't. It's just harder to say out loud now because everyone's afraid of the echo. Whoopi jumped in, her voice steady but cautious, trying to keep the show from unraveling completely. Maybe we can all agree comedy evolves, she said, trying to draw both of them back to neutral ground. Eddie turned to her, softening his tone out of respect. Sure, he said, but evolution doesn't mean erasing the fossils that built the ground you stand on. The audience let out a low, thoughtful hum. That's sound people make when they know they've just heard something real. Joy tried to hold her smile, but her eyes told a different story. For the first time that morning, she looked small behind the desk she usually dominated. She glanced at her notes, then at the cameras, then back at Eddie. Joy straightened her back, clutching her cue cards like a shield. The cracks in her voice were starting to show, but she pushed through them anyway. You think you're untouchable because you're beloved, she said, forcing authority back into her tone. But popularity isn't morality, Eddie. Just because people love you doesn't mean you're right. Eddie tilted his head slightly, a slow grin forming. Not amused, just dangerous. And neither is hypocrisy with a microphone, he said. The crowd murmured. It wasn't laughter this time. It was the sound of people realizing the gloves were gone. Joy tried to pivot, talking faster now, trying to regain rhythm. You built a career on making fun of people, she said. You mocked entire groups and now act like some kind of wise elder statesman of comedy. Spare me, Eddie's eyes narrowed just slightly. And you built a career mocking your guests, he said evenly. You preach empathy while mocking people who disagree with you. You call it accountability. I call it theater. Bad theater that hit. Joy's face stiffened. Her smile fell apart. She leaned forward, her voice rising. At least I'm not hiding behind nostalgia, she snapped. At least I've evolved. Eddie leaned back in his chair, calm again. No, he said. You're not evolved. You're hiding behind applause. You wait for people to clap before you decide what's right. That's not progress, Joy. That's performance. The audience gasped. Sharp, collective, unfiltered. Even Whoopi's jaw tightened. Joy tried to fire back, but nothing came out. Eddie didn't let the silence linger long. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, his tone low but commanding, every word deliberate. I've faced critics, haters, racism, envy, all of it, and I'm still here. He paused, eyes locked on hers. But you, he said, voice like steel, you're the easiest opponent of them all. Because you think cruelty is intellect, the words hit harder than anything before. The audience shifted, whispering, waiting. Joy's face reddened, her composure slipping completely now. The practiced grin she wore every morning was gone, replaced by something raw. Panic, maybe even shame. Joy's voice cracked as the pressure finally broke through her polished calm. You're twisting everything I say, she snapped, her tone sharper than ever, eyes flashing with that mix of anger and panic that comes when control starts slipping away. Eddie didn't blink. He leaned forward slightly, his tone cool but cutting. No, Joy, he said, I'm untwisting what you've hidden. That line hit her harder than any direct insult could. She tried to recover, to get back on script, but the rhythm was gone. The conversation was no longer hers to steer. Eddie had taken the wheel, and the whole studio knew it. He pressed on, his voice calm but lethal. You don't ask questions, Joy. You build traps. You don't seek truth. You seek victims. Joy let out a small laugh, but it sounded hollow. You're paranoid, she said, waving her hand dismissively, trying to turn the crowd against him. Eddie's tone rose, not with anger, but power. No, I'm experienced. The audience erupted in quiet gasps and nervous laughter. Even Whoopi, trying her best to stay neutral, couldn't hide the smirk that tugged at her lips. Joy sat back, stung, but Eddie wasn't done. He leaned forward again, this time with that unmistakable spark in his eyes. The same look that made audiences fall silent before a punchline that always hit home. "You can't gaslight a man who's been through Hollywood in the 80s, he said, his voice slicing through the tension. "I've seen worse villains than you, and most of them were funnier." The studio exploded in laughter. Real laughter this time, sharp and uncontrollable. Whoopi buried her face in her hands, laughing despite herself. Even the camera operator couldn't hide a shaky chuckle. Joy froze, her lips tightening, the color draining from her face. The humiliation was public now, irreversible. Eddie sat back, arms crossed, calm again, like a fighter who knew the match was already over. "See, Joy," he said quietly, almost pitying, "you can throw all the punches you want, but it only hurts if the person cares what you think." Eddie stared at her for a long moment, his patience finally gone. Then slowly he stood. The audience felt it immediately. The shift in power, the pulse of something raw and real. The air in the studio turned electric. "You wanted a headline, Joy?" he said, his voice low but carrying across every inch of the room. "Here it is. Legends don't kneel to bullies." Joy's breath caught. "I'm just doing my job," she blurted out, her voice trembling, the words more defensive than confident. Eddie shook his head, eyes never leaving hers. "No, Joy," he said, calm but unflinching. "You're doing your hobby. Humiliation." A hush fell, the kind of hush that swallows every sound in the room. Eddie's tone wasn't loud, but it hit like a hammer. Steady, measured, undeniable. Joy looked around for backup, for someone to jump in, but no one did. Not Whoopi, not Sarah, not the crew. No one. The only sound was the faint buzz of the studio lights and the weight of truth pressing down on her. Eddie took a step forward, not threatening, just deliberate. A man choosing his last words carefully. "You asked for accountability," he said, his voice softer now, almost reflective. "Here's mine. I'm accountable for every laugh I ever earned. Every person I made forget their problems for 5 minutes. Every story that made people feel something real." He paused, letting it sink in. Then his eyes locked on Joy again. "You?" he said, each word clean, precise, impossible to dodge. "You're accountable for every person you've shamed in the name of virtue." The words landed like a verdict. Joy sat frozen, eyes wide, realizing she had nothing left to say. Eddie gave a small nod. Not triumphant, not smug, just final. "I don't do well with bullies," he said quietly. "Never have. Never will." And with that, he reached up, unclipped his microphone, and set it down on the table. The tiny click echoed through the studio like a gunshot. No one moved. No one spoke. Eddie turned, calm and unhurried, and walked off the set with the quiet dignity of a man who didn't need applause. Just truth. Joy sat there, pale and speechless, surrounded by cameras still rolling, realizing she had just become the headline she thought she was writing. What you just witnessed wasn't a talk show. It was a masterclass in self-respect. Eddie Murphy didn't just defend his career, he defended every artist who's ever been told to apologize for being bold, for being real, for being uncomfortable. When he said, "I don't do well with bullies," he wasn't just talking to Joy Behar. He was talking to anyone who's ever tried to weaponize shame against truth. What do you think? Was Eddie right to walk off? Or did Joy get what she deserved? Share your thoughts below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more explosive showdowns, powerful moments, and stories that pull no punches.